And joining me now is Dr. Anthony Fauci, Director of the National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. Dr. Fauci, welcome back to Meet the Press.
Good to be with you.
All right, so the issue of testing, we've heard the President say anybody that wants a test can get a test. I understand that's not quite where we are yet. Are we still under are we still on only like a few thousand people have been tested?
Yeah, well, what's happened now is that we really are accelerating dramatically. I mean, early on there were some missteps with regard to the test and some technical aspects to it. But right now, I believe 1.1 million tests have already been sent out. By Monday, there'll be an additional 400,000. And by the end of next week, probably around 4 million.
And what does that mean? Or what about the testing capacity?
Yeah,
I mean, by the end of next week, what kind of data will you have that will allow you to make some new decisions?
Well, there are a couple of things about testing, Chuck, that are important that people need to understand. There's testing of an individual doctor, a physician, who wants to know if a person is infected or not. That physician has the responsibility of asking for the test and getting it. And then there's another aspect of testing where you do surveillance in the country to determine if there are under the radar screen a number of individuals. Both of those things are going to be going on now at full speed.
So when do you feel like you'll have a better sense of the scope of this outbreak?
You know, I think we're getting a better sense as the day goes by. Unfortunately, that better sense is not encouraging because we're seeing community spread. And whenever you see community spread, you can do contact tracing. But as more community spread, it becomes logistically more difficult.
And is it a waste of time almost because of resources or not?
You know, that's a great question. Yeah. There comes a time, Chuck, when you have containment, which you're trying to find out who's infected and put them in isolation. And if and when that happens, I hope it's if and not when, that you get so many people who are infected that the best thing you need to do is what we call mitigation in addition to containment.
We saw the extreme action taken in Italy.
Right.
We've seen warnings. Washington State is out there with saying anybody over the age of 60 needs to take extra precaution, maybe stay home, don't go to large events. What's the likelihood we are going to have to do more extreme quarantining? Well,
you know, I think right now something that's important that I hope the American people appreciate is that the risk of getting into trouble with this infection, namely if you are infected, is overwhelmingly weighted towards people with underlying conditions and the elderly. And that's the reason why if you are an elderly person with an underlying condition, if you get infected, the risk of getting into trouble is considerable. So it's our responsibility to protect the vulnerable. When I say protect, I mean right now, not wait until things get worse. Say no large crowds, no long trips, and above all, don't get on a cruise ship.
No cruise, and how about no airplanes, no trains? Well, I mean, where are you on transportation?
No, here's where the recommendation from the CDC, I feel this way strongly, and this will be a recommendation. If you're a person with an underlying condition, and you are particularly an elderly person with an underlying condition, you need to think twice about getting on a plane on a long trip, and not only think twice, just don't get on a cruise ship.
So where are we going over the next 3 months? Are we going to the point, there's been different ways, do we need to prepare for a spike? Or is our job mitigation to try to sort of level out the spike, which means it'll be here for a while, but in a low-level way? What is it that what is success going to look like here?
It's going to be two things. It's going to be try and prevent the actual spread. And there are a couple of ways of doing that. Prevent from without and in, the kinds of travel restrictions that we impose and that even airlines and others impose upon themselves. And in here, to take a look at what you have, that if you can do containment with contact tracing, great. You don't want to give it up. But also start seriously looking at this kind of mitigation. They call it social distancing, but it's common sense stuff. You don't want to go to a massive gathering, particularly if you're a vulnerable individual.
So are we talking even church services? I mean, maybe anything. Are we looking at anything 15 to 20 people? Is that what you're? Is that the social distancing recommendation?
Well, again, it depends on who you are, and the question is, if you're a vulnerable person, take it seriously, because particularly when you have community spread, you may not know at any given time that there are people who are infected.
Sporting events. What would you tell the NCAA if they came to you right now? You know, that's coming up, opening day. I mean, these may seem superficial to some people, these questions, but Part of the economic engine, part of the health issues. What would you do?
Chuck, in real time, you got to evaluate the situation. If we continue to see the community spread go up, I think you need to seriously look at anything that's a large gathering. Again, I have to underscore, Chuck, particularly if you're an individual who has an underlying condition and are vulnerable.
What's the most realistic way this ends, where immunity is what kills this, meaning enough people get it and over time it just stops catching? A vaccine is what ends this, or it will burn itself out?
Well, it's probably going to be a combination of both. What will likely happen, we're not going to have a vaccine that's deployable for at least a year to a year and a half. So right now...
And what does that vaccine look like? Is that part of a flu shot at the end of the day? Is that what that's going to look like?
Yeah, well, it's certainly not flu, but it'll be the same sort of thing. You'll probably go in and just get an injection. That's the thing.
So that's vaccine.
So that's vaccine. That's not today. If this cycles through, maybe even goes down a bit and comes back next year, that's when you get public health plus a vaccine. We hope this just goes away, burns itself out the way SARS did. But if it doesn't, and it cycles in a seasonal way, that's when a vaccine comes in.
How uncomfortable is it that perhaps China's authoritarian ways did prevent this? Meaning, had China been a free and open society, this might have spread faster?
You know, in the beginning, Chuck, they were not as transparent as we would have liked. What they were saying at the end of December, that all that cluster of 24 cases were related to contact with an animal reservoir. That wasn't the case, because there was human to human to human going on a few weeks before. If the Chinese themselves had known that, the health authorities, people I know, my colleagues, they would have given social distancing right away instead of having a 40,000 person block party is what they had, unfortunately. Yeah.
But their extreme quarantines, has that worked?
Well, you know, it has. I mean, that's not the usual thing you do. Their efforts have been draconian, something we never would be able to do here. But even though there's a lot of things that have unintended negative consequences of that, I think it did help dampen what would have been a broader Chinese. Wuhan was terrible, but I think they prevented a broader spread.
Are you more optimistic today than you were last week?
Well, it depends on what you mean by optimistic. We are certainly, now that we have tests out and get a better handle, but clearly I'm concerned about community spread. You have to realistically be concerned about community spread.
All right, Dr. Anthony Fauci, thanks for coming on, sharing your expertise with us. We're all listening.
Always good to be with you, Chuck.
Thank you, sir. Hello from Washington, I'm Chuck Todd, and thanks for checking out the Meet the Press channel on YouTube. Click on the button down here to subscribe, and click over here to watch the latest interviews, highlights, and other digital exclusives.